The dawn presses its cold fingers through the cracks of a half-ruined monastery, slipping between broken walls and shattered windows like a thief seeking what remains unseen. Light falls in thin, trembling beams, illuminating dust motes that hang in the air like suspended lanterns, flickering gold against stone and shadow. Each mote is a memory, each flicker a heartbeat of what this place once was. The air smells of damp stone, smoldering wax, and the faint tang of decayed paper. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, the faint memory of fire still lingers, a ghost of heat in a place long surrendered to cold. Outside, the wind sighs through splintered beams, carrying with it the hollow toll of distant bells. They vibrate through empty corridors, hollowed halls where monks once chanted prayers that now linger only in echoes and silence. A lone scholar, cloaked in wool too thin to guard against the biting frost, bends over fragile parchments scattered like fallen leaves across a worn oak table. Each page trembles under his fingers, curling at the edges, ink faded to a ghostly whisper of letters no one speaks aloud anymore. He traces each symbol, fingertips brushing over centuries, as though his touch alone might awaken voices long silenced. Candlelight flickers, casting shadows that stretch across sunken cheeks and weary eyes, painting ghostly shapes on walls pocked with time and ruin. Smoke from the wick curls upward, mingling with the dust, carrying with it the scent of memory. Smoke, frost, candle wax, and the faint undertone of something long lost, the decay of knowledge forgotten. Hours pass in the frozen stillness. The scholar's breath clouds the air as he leans closer, eyes straining to read the ghostly ink. Every parchment is alive with history, each symbol a trap and a door at once, fragile bridges to civilizations erased by war, plague, and time. He pauses on a mark, perhaps a signature, perhaps a curse, and chills run down his spine. The room, though narrow, feels impossibly vast with the weight of history pressing against it. He is not merely reading. He is listening to centuries whisper, cough, murmur from the brittle paper beneath his fingers. Outside, a raven croaks, its black feathers brushing against frost-laden eaves, a living echo of the silence that surrounds him. It lifts into the gray morning, wings scraping clouds, carrying with it the chill of the dawn, the scent of stone and decay, and the whisper of lives that never should have ended so quietly. He uncovers a folio, bound in cracked leather scorched by fire. The edges bleed into ash and memory, and inside, names and prayers are etched with trembling devotion. He reads softly, tasting the syllables as one might taste bitter wine, imagining those who wrote them. Hands trembling, hearts beating against uncertainty, eyes darting over walls for enemies, for fire, for something that might never come. Each name is a life. Each prayer is a breath of hope in a world teetering between devotion and despair. The scholar traces the ink with reverent fingers, and for a moment, the monastery itself seems to exhale, its stone walls sighing with relief that someone listens. Beyond the monastery, winter gathers its strength. Frost forms jagged lace on broken windows. Wind rattles splintered shutters, and a forest sleeps in a blanket of gray, silent except for the distant call of creatures who haunt shadows between trees. The world outside is indifferent, yet alive, as if knowing that what is preserved within these crumbling walls is fragile and irreplaceable. The scholar does not notice hunger, nor does he notice cold. Only the pressing urgency of discovery, of piecing together voices swallowed by dust and fire. Each parchment is a vessel, each mark a pulse of human intent, a testament to those who dared to believe that words might survive what men and time could not. A sudden draft extinguishes the candle. Darkness swallows the scholar, pressing against his ears, his skin, his lungs. He pauses, listening to the silence, feeling it gather in the corners of the room like a living thing. The candle is relit, trembling in his hand. Light returns, fragile, but enough to make the faded ink shimmer, to reveal the hidden layers beneath the surface of fragile paper. The monastery is not merely stone. It is memory in flesh and bone, a living relic that bears witness to love, betrayal, devotion, and fear. The scholar realizes that history is not static. It breathes, it shifts, it waits for those who dare to listen. He turns to a page covered in maps. Rivers twist in impossible directions. Mountains fold upon themselves in ink. Cities marked with alphabets no longer recognized. He studies them, tracing imagined paths with trembling fingers, imagining armies marching, pilgrims walking, merchants trading under foreign suns. The parchment hums beneath his touch, vibrating with the ghosts of footsteps, the whisper of robes across stone floors, the muffled cries of children, the prayers of monks, the sighs of scholars who bent over their work long before him. Time folds in the room, and he is both observer and participant, caught in the impossible intimacy of reading lives that are gone yet present. The scholar mutters fragments of text, tasting the cadence, the rhythm, the subtle pauses left by the hands of those long dead. He hears in the margins the unspoken fears, the defiance against tyrants, the longing for beauty and understanding. The ink is not simply words. It is intention made tangible, a fragile thread tying him to a continuum that stretches back centuries. Outside, the raven circles, a dark sentinel tracing arcs against a pale sky, watching the scholar as if it, too, knows the weight of what is held within these walls. Time passes in loops. Shadows stretch and shrink with the rising sun. Dust drifts in the beams. And yet the scholar reads on, oblivious to the world beyond. He uncovers letters bearing the tremors of human hope and despair. Pleas for mercy, declarations of faith, curses spat in ink against enemies, promises of loyalty, confessions of love. Each word is a heartbeat, each line a pulse of life once lived. He leans back, exhausted, yet unwilling to leave a single symbol unread, a single story untouched. A sudden realization strikes him, a name, a place, a date, a line that could unravel centuries of mystery. He traces the letters with care, letting his imagination reconstruct the lives behind them. He sees monks walking barefoot across stone floors, scholars huddled over flickering candles, children hiding from invaders who burn without mercy. The monastery is no longer a ruin but a stage, each shadow a character, each creaking floorboard a line in the narrative of survival, of devotion, of the human spirit striving against the relentless march of time. He pauses, listening to the silence. Outside, the wind gathers, rattling the walls, sweeping across the broken tiles, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves, the distant cries of animals, the echo of history itself. The scholar rises slowly, folio in hand, and moves toward the doorway where light and shadow meet. He knows that beyond these walls lies a world harsh and unforgiving, yet alive, breathing and waiting, full of voices yet to be heard. And as he steps into the cold, the monastery exhales, releasing centuries of whispers into the wind, secrets bound in ink and parchment dissolving into memory, ready to be carried forward by those willing to listen. The raven returns once more, landing on a ledge above the scholar, black eyes gleaming in the weak morning light. It cocks its head, croaks, and lifts again, a sentinel moving through air that tastes of frost and forgotten knowledge. The scholar follows its flight with his eyes, feeling the pull of history behind him, urging him onward. Each step he takes beyond the monastery is measured, reverent, a negotiation with time itself. The past presses gently against his back, alive in the fragile parchments he carries, alive in the echoes that haunt stone corridors, alive in the memories of those who once walked these halls and whose voices refused to die quietly. He pauses at the threshold, the world opening before him in shades of gray and gold. Frost clings to his cloak, the air bites his cheeks, yet he feels the warmth of purpose. History is not merely written, it is lived, breathed, carried forward. The monastery stands behind him, silent but speaking, a repository of lives, of dreams, of betrayals, of faith, waiting for the next soul who will pause to listen, to feel, to understand. And as he steps forward into the open, the raven arcs across the sky once more, a black sentinel tracing the horizon, carrying with it the eternal reminder that the past is never gone, only waiting. The marketplace lay in a heavy, almost sacred silence, draped in the slow exhale of a city abandoned to its own memory. Sunlight pooled over the uneven cobblestones, glinting in puddles left by a morning rain that had whispered secrets to every crack and crevice. The banners, once bright with the pride of merchant houses, now flapped like the frail wings of moths, bleached by sun and wind, their tattered threads brushing the stone in soft sighs. The air smelled of damp earth, of aged wood, of soot curling from fires long extinguished. In the distance, a chimney still spat a stubborn wisp of smoke, carrying with it the faint tang of roasting grain, as if the city itself tried to remember the scent of its own vitality. Amid the ruins crouched a young scribe, their knees pressing against cold stones slick with moisture. Fingers, small and calloused, traced the winding curves of ledgers left behind by merchants who had vanished into history. The ink was smudged, some lines erased by rain, others blurred by the careless hand of a world that no longer paused to preserve. Yet the scribe followed them with reverent patience, as though coaxing the spirits of the past to speak through the fragile, curling letters. Each curve, each spiral, seemed to hold a memory, a pulse, a heartbeat. The writing was not just marks on paper. It was the rhythm of human life, recorded in the thin, trembling voice of a hand that had lived centuries ago. The marketplace breathed in echoes. The smell of stale bread clung to the air, mingling with the sharp tang of iron from coins half buried in mud, and the distant scent of wood smoke, as if a hearth somewhere still refused to die. The scribe inhaled deeply, letting these odors guide their thoughts, letting them stitch together the lives behind the scattered remnants. A half-crushed loaf of bread lay in a corner, its crust broken, its interior a soft and rotting promise. Near it, a rat darted between stones, pausing briefly to sniff the air, and then vanished again, a small testament to life persisting where decay dominated. The scribe bent over a clay tablet, its surface etched with jagged lines that had once formed prayers, contracts, or warnings. Each scratch was a whisper from a soul long gone. The hand that had carved it had been desperate, trembling, alive with need and fear. The scribe's own fingers traced the grooves, feeling the uneven ridges, imagining the rhythm of a heartbeat beneath the hand that made them. There was devotion here, yes, and desperation, but also a fragile hope. Hope that their words, their lives, might survive the slow crush of time. Above, a crow lifted from the fountain at the square's center. Its wings cut through the mist like knives, sending droplets scattering over mosaics cracked and dulled by centuries. The scribe looked up and watched the bird glide across the air, black feathers glinting against the sun's sudden glare. Its call echoed, sharp and insistent, as if reminding the living that the dead still observed, still judged, still whispered across the fog of memory. The city responded in kind. Stones seemed to hum faintly. The wind slipped through broken arches, and the faint drip of water from gutters became a rhythm that synchronized with the scribe's pulse. A tapestry, frayed at the edges and dulled with dust, hung limply from a collapsed stall. Its threads, faded to shades of ochre and gray, told a story that no voice now recited. There were faces in the weave, merchants, children, beggars, soldiers, all frozen mid-motion. Some hands reached toward invisible flames. Others clutched coins or bread. The scribe ran fingers over the threads, feeling the rough texture of memory, feeling the stories trapped in color and weave, imagining the lives stitched into every fiber. The past here was not abstract. It was tactile, alive in a way that textbooks never could capture, insistent and almost pleading to be remembered. The shadows in the marketplace stretched and recoiled as if they had a mind of their own. They pooled around fallen stalls, around the edges of broken fountains, around the scattered debris of a life abandoned. The scribe stepped lightly among them, careful not to disturb the delicate conversation between light and stone. These shadows were guardians, keeping some secrets from the casual eye, yet they could not stop a patient seeker. Fingers left inked trails on forgotten ledgers. Eyes traced the movement of a spider across a cracked wall. Ears listened for the whispers of wind through narrow alleys. The city spoke, but only to those who had the courage to listen. The scribe paused, inhaling the cold, damp air. Somewhere nearby, the faint clatter of metal suggested that a stray coin had rolled from the pocket of some ghostly merchant, spinning across the stone before settling into a puddle. The sound was small, almost laughable in its isolation, yet it resonated, echoing against the empty walls, reminding the scribe that even in silence, the world remembered its transactions, its debts, its betrayals. Every sound here was a story, every echo a pulse of human desire preserved in the bones of the city. Hands tracing ink-stained curves, the scribe found themselves drawn to a corner of the square where a fountain, chipped and moss-covered, still held water. It reflected a gray sky and the skeletal outlines of banners above, and the scribe imagined the children who once splashed in its shallow basin, their laughter lost now to eternity. A stone frog, its mouth open in eternal croak, perched at the edge. The scribe's gaze lingered, and for a moment, the city seemed less like ruins and more like a living organism, breathing quietly, waiting for the next hand to trace its veins and coax its stories from the shadows. A sudden gust of wind carried the scent of ash, reminding the scribe of fires that had come and gone, of hearths extinguished by war or neglect. The air trembled with memory, and with it, the scribe felt the touch of grief. Grief for lives that had been consumed by famine, by plague, by sword. Grief for children who had never seen their parents again. Grief for love letters burned in haste or left to rot in empty chambers. Yet beneath the grief ran something subtler, something that had survived despite everything. Devotion. Prayers etched in stone, hymns woven into cloth, curses whispered into the shadows. All of them were acts of persistence, of refusing to vanish entirely. The scribe leaned over a ledger, inhaling the faint odor of ink, dust, and wet parchment. The letters coiled and twisted like serpents, but in their twisting lay logic, emotion, and story. A merchant had written of loss, of a stolen horse, of debts that could never be repaid. Another had scrawled a simple prayer for safety before departing on a journey that would never end. And here, in these threads of memory, the scribe found a reflection of themselves, a seeker, alone among ruins, searching for connection, searching for the pulse of humanity that still lingered despite centuries of neglect. Above, the sky shifted from gray to the pale gold of mid-morning. Light spilled into alleys and cracks, revealing textures invisible in the early mist. The pitted surface of stone steps, the fragile edges of collapsed roofs, the rough, weathered bark of trees whose roots had begun reclaiming the stalls. The city seemed to exhale, to stretch into the warmth, and the scribe followed the rhythms of light and shadow, allowing them to guide exploration as much as curiosity. Each step became a dialogue, each careful movement a meditation on the persistence of memory. The crow returned, circling the fountain in slow, deliberate arcs. Its feathers caught the sunlight, shimmering faintly, and its call punctuated the silence, demanding attention. The scribe watched it, feeling an odd kinship. Like the crow, they were alone, observing, recording, preserving. And yet, unlike the bird, they could speak through time, translating the silent histories into language that might survive, that might reach others who dared to follow the same path through shadowed streets. The marketplace held more than stones and ink and cloth. It held rhythm, pulse, and song. Every discarded object, every fragment of text, every shadow cast across a puddle was a note in a symphony that demanded attention. The scribe listened, tracing the notes with fingertips and mind alike, piecing together stories of human endurance. A child clinging to a mother's hand, a soldier riding home in secret, a lover hiding a message beneath a brick. Life persisted in small gestures, in scraps of paper, in frayed threads, refusing to vanish entirely. As the day climbed toward noon, the scribe rose slowly, leaving puddles, coins, and rat tracks behind. Each step carried the weight of centuries, yet also the lightness of one who had glimpsed the pulse beneath the decay. The shadows had shortened, yet they lingered, folding into corners, hinting at stories yet untold. The crow perched again, silent, wings tucked, watching, a sentinel of the past. The scribe paused at the edge of the square, wind tugging at robes, the sun on their back, the smell of damp earth and smoke mingling with the faint tang of iron. They looked back once, imagining the city alive, imagining the voices of merchants, children, and lovers weaving through the streets. And then, slowly, they turned forward, stepping into the narrow lanes that led from the square, carrying with them the weight of memory, the pulse of desire, and a fragile thread of devotion that tied them to the centuries. The city whispered one final message, soft as a dying breath. That memory endures where life dares to listen. That grief, fear, and longing are immortal if tended to by those willing to seek them. And that even in silence, the pulse of humanity persists, fragile but unbroken. The scribe moved onward, each step a promise to keep listening, to keep tracing, to keep preserving the stories etched in stone, in ink, in thread, until the next hand came to hear them, until the next heart opened to the pulse of a city long forgotten. The torches along the castle walls gutter and sway, their flames struggling against a wind that presses with the weight of storms yet to break. The banners, shredded by time and tempest alike, flap like spectral wings against the jagged stone, their colors muted by centuries and rain. Beyond the ramparts, the horizon churns with clouds heavy as iron, rolling and crackling with energy, lightning splitting the sky in jagged, brief revelations of the battlements. The castle groans under the storm's assault, each stone echoing a complaint that has no audience but the wind. Somewhere, a bell tolls, its hollow clang swallowed and distorted by the roar of the tempest. It marks hours no one counts, moments that slip past in a rhythm older than memory, older than kings, older than the stones themselves. Inside, the castle harbors a secret. Behind a false panel in the library, the archivist works in solitude, a lone figure among scrolls that smell of dust, beeswax, and the lingering bite of ink. Each scroll is tied with ribbons of silk faded to gray by centuries, yet they retain a dignity, a quiet insistence that commands attention. The air is thick and still, yet alive with the accumulated presence of those long gone. Scribes, scholars, kings, and priests who leaned over these same surfaces, hands trembling, heartbeats quickened by fear or awe. The archivist inhales, savoring the scent, as though breathing the lives contained in the curves of every letter. Each script speaks a language that no living tongue fully remembers, a language that measured power and guilt alike, that dictated faith and codified morality in loops and swirls of ink. He traces a line with a fingertip, feeling the deliberate pulse beneath his touch. The shapes are precise, almost ritualistic, a rhythm echoing drums of war long silenced, or the measured chanting of monks kneeling in cloisters lost to time. One scroll trembles beneath his fingers as he unfolds it. The parchment is brittle, yet defiant, whispering secrets that may be forbidden or merely forgotten. There are maps of cities swallowed by sand, treaties with strangers whose faces exist only in ink, and rituals that seem to summon silence itself, a void more powerful than any sword. A rat scuttles across the cold stone floor, claws clicking softly, pausing to sniff at a crust of bread, hard and stale, yet still offering a hint of sustenance, a ghost of domestic life long vanished. The storm outside lashes at the walls and the shutters, but within, the archivist listens to a quieter sound, the heartbeat of vanished civilizations, each pulse carried through the ink on parchment, each line a fragile lifeline connecting him to ambitions and follies that shaped kingdoms and toppled empires. The room itself seems suspended between times, a place where past and present entwine, where every breath carries the weight of centuries. He lifts a scroll carefully, brushing away centuries of dust, and the candlelight catches the curves of its letters, revealing their meticulous artistry. The archivist's eyes strain in the dim glow, deciphering shapes that twist with intent, each loop and line humming with significance. One sentence shivers across the page, hinting at knowledge denied to ordinary eyes. A city lost to memory, a secret pact forged in shadow, or a ritual designed to bind the voices of the world to silence. He imagines the streets of that city, slick with rain, the marketplace alive with merchants, children, and the clatter of armor. Each imagined step, each imagined voice, echoes with the lives that once were, now reduced to ink and parchment. Lightning flashes illuminating the archivist's gaunt face, casting long shadows that dance along the stone walls. He can almost hear the clamor of life that once thrived in the spaces these scrolls describe. And yet, the weight of centuries presses upon him, the reminder that knowledge is fragile, that the past is not fixed, and that every truth recovered carries the risk of unraveling the present. Each line of ink is a thread in a vast tapestry, connecting triumph and terror, loyalty and betrayal, love and ambition, each indistinguishable until held close and read with care. The storm continues to rage, punctuating the quiet with a relentless percussion of rain and wind. The archivist leans closer to the parchment, inhaling the musty scent of history, feeling the pulse of the human stories trapped within. Each curve of a letter is a heartbeat, each fold of a scroll a sigh. He imagines the scribe who wrote it, hunched over a candle centuries ago, heart hammering in the silence of night, aware of danger, yet compelled to record, to preserve, to speak across time. The archivist understands, in a quiet, shivering way, that he is now the conduit, the fragile bridge between that long-vanished world and the present moment. Hours pass unmarked by clock or sun, measured only by the storm and the unraveling of secrets. He reads treaties signed in fear, debts owed by kings long dead, alliances formed and broken in chambers now silent. The weight of generations presses against his shoulders, demanding comprehension, patience, reverence. Outside, the wind rattles the stone and the bannered battlements shiver with each gust, echoing the tremor of his own heartbeat. Inside, candlelight flickers over lines that speak of ambition and folly, the same impulses that shaped kingdoms, crowned kings, and left empires in ruin. A sudden crack of thunder shakes the castle, and the archivist startles, his hands frozen mid-air. He listens for echoes beyond the walls, half expecting the ghosts of the past to answer. The silence of the storm's eye falls into the room, leaving only the soft scratch of quill against parchment, the whisper of paper as he turns it carefully. Every line is a voice resurrected, every word a fragment of a life that dared to reach across time. The archivist pauses, brushing a tear from the corner of his eye. He is aware of his own smallness, a man among centuries. Yet he feels the thrill of discovery as though a spark has been struck in the darkness. The scrolls whisper of kingdoms that rose and fell in moments of ambition, of men and women who risked everything for knowledge or survival, of sacrifices etched into the very stones of the earth. Each line is a reminder that power is fleeting, yet memory endures, fragile but persistent, held in ink and paper in the hands of those willing to listen. Lightning flares once more, briefly illuminating the spines of other forgotten tomes, their dust motes suspended like stars in the flickering light. In that illumination, the archivist glimpses the enormity of his charge, the preservation of the pulse of humanity itself. Outside, the storm begins to wane, the wind dying to a distant murmur, but its memory lingers, a silent witness to the force and fragility of life and history. He stands, letting the scroll rest in his hands, tying it gently with its faded silk ribbon. Each scroll is more than a record. It is a testament, a lifeline, a reminder of what it means to dream and to fail, to reach and to fall, to love and to betray. Knowledge is both burden and gift, a power that illuminates and shadows in equal measure. He feels the weight of it as he rises, the stone floor cold beneath his feet, the quiet of centuries pressing upon him like a cloak. Outside, dawn begins to brush the horizon, pale and tentative against the storm-dark sky. Light spills through arrow slits, revealing the contours of dust and parchment, the faint imprint of hands that have touched these scrolls before him. He knows the world beyond these walls, is unaware of the treasures hidden in shadow, the voices sleeping in ink, the histories that have survived only because someone once cared to write them. And he knows, too, that some stories will be lost again, swallowed by time, or forgotten in human folly, despite his vigilance. The archivist moves carefully through the library, sensing the presence of generations in the air. Scribes hunched over desks in candlelight, kings whispering in chambers, warriors marching across cobblestones, priests murmuring prayers that will never be heard again. Every scroll, every book is a heartbeat, a pulse of human ambition, loyalty, love, and fear. And in this quiet, in this fragile sanctuary, he feels that pulse as strongly as his own. He pauses at the hidden panel, brushing his hand across the smooth stone, listening to the faint echoes of the storm's retreat. The castle is still, yet it breathes with the lives it once contained, each wall a silent witness to devotion and treachery, hunger and generosity, hope and despair. The archivist closes his eyes, imagining the voices of the past merging with the present, each note distinct yet harmonious, creating a tapestry of existence that is both ephemeral and eternal. The storm has passed, leaving only the lingering scent of wet stone and wild air, and the quiet whisper of history in ink and parchment. The archivist returns to his work, guided by the fragile light of a candle, the rhythm of centuries flowing through him. Each scroll is a lifeline, each word a spark of humanity reaching through darkness, defying oblivion. The past has spoken, and he listens, and in listening, he becomes both guardian and witness, a solitary sentinel in the corridors of time. And as the first true light of morning pierces the shadows, illuminating dust and parchment alike, the archivist knows that he is not alone. The ghosts of civilizations long vanished linger in the air, their ambitions, fears, and loves etched into the ink. The storm has passed, yet its memory persists, a warning, a promise, a testament to the fragile persistence of life and knowledge. The archivist prepares to read again, to hear once more the whispers of the past, to carry forward the pulse of civilizations that refuse to die entirely, leaving footprints in ink, waiting for eyes willing to see. Through the frost-laden forest, the monk moved with deliberate care, each step a measured note in the symphony of winter silence. Snow clung to the gnarled roots of ancient oaks, their blackened limbs stretching skyward like skeletal hands grasping at a gray dawn. Each crunch beneath his boots echoed like a heartbeat through the quiet, a small assertion of life in a realm that seemed to exist between worlds, where time slowed to the rhythm of ice and shadow. His satchel, heavy with manuscripts wrapped in oilcloth, swung gently against his side, releasing the faint, sacred perfume of leather, ink, and old parchment. It was a scent that carried memory itself, a delicate incense of devotion, fear, and the unyielding persistence of human voice across centuries. The forest seemed to hold its breath around him, as though aware of the fragile cargo he bore. He paused beside a frozen brook, where the ice, thin and opaque, revealed fleeting shapes pressed into its surface. Were they messages, carved by hands now dust, or careless marks left by travelers long since swallowed by the earth? He knelt, fingertips brushing the ice, feeling the tremor of years beneath his touch. Each crack and groove was a whisper, a hesitant attempt at communication across the void. The wind answered in kind, carrying a language he could not speak but understood in the marrow of his bones. Tones of kings long dead, of priests whose prayers had once commanded fire and rain, of lovers whose passion had burned beneath the moon and now lingered in the frost. Inside the satchel, the manuscripts seemed almost alive. He lifted one with reverent care, unwrapping the protective oilcloth as if opening a sacred tomb. The letters on the scroll unfurled like mist rising from a blackened hearth, curling and twisting in the cold morning light, forming ephemeral shapes that hinted at entire lifetimes. Scenes emerged in his mind's eye. A king kneeling at an altar of a god whose name had been swallowed by centuries, his crown tarnished and hands trembling as he offered what little remained of his people's devotion. A widow walking barefoot across frozen fields, clutching her children to her chest, faces pale as frost, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. Scribes hunched over flickering torches, recording in delicate ink the heartbeat of a world that would soon vanish beneath the relentless march of time. He breathed in the cold, the scent of earth, the faint tang of pine resin, and the subtler aroma of history preserved in ink and vellum. Every manuscript was a portal, a voice demanding that he remember, a testament that life itself, however fleeting, had once been lived in the fullness of joy, terror, devotion, and betrayal. Some scrolls carried lists of names, offerings to gods no longer called upon, rituals performed under moonless nights when shadows had power over the living. Others recounted deeds of rulers whose empires had roared like storms, armies whose steps had shaken mountains, courts where alliances were made and broken in a single whispered word. The forest, it seemed, responded in kind. The snow around him trembled, the branches above quivered, and he felt as though the trees themselves recognized the reverence he offered to memory. A bird startled, wings brushing snow-laden branches, sending cascades of white to the ground like ash falling from a long-extinguished fire. He watched it vanish into the gray morning, a fleeting witness to a world that might otherwise be lost to silence. Its sudden motion reminded him of the fragility of his own life, yet also of the necessity of persistence. He carried more than parchment. He carried responsibility. Every word inked in a careful hand, Every curve of a letter was a lifeline connecting him to the souls who had poured breath and hope into these pages. He opened another scroll, feeling the delicate resistance of paper aged beyond memory. The letters shimmered faintly in the dawn, curling and twisting like smoke rising from a fire long cold. Stories emerged. A farmer trading his only cow for a favor he would later regret. A monk pleading for mercy from a lord who wore cruelty as a crown. Children chasing snowflakes across a courtyard where echoes of laughter now clung to stone like frost. Each life, once vibrant and immediate, was reduced to symbols etched in ink, yet in his hands they breathed with renewed presence. The forest around him became a living echo of these stories, the shadows thickening and thinning in time with his awareness, and the snow beneath his boots seeming to remember every footfall ever taken along these paths. He pressed onward, each step carrying him deeper into silence, deeper into history itself. The crunch of snow punctuated the stillness like the tolling of a hidden bell. He imagined countless feet that had walked this forest before, long bones now hidden beneath frost, carrying burdens not unlike his own. Their voices pressed upon him, insistent yet fragile, urging him to remember what they had known and lost. The wind shifted, scattering flakes across his shoulders. He paused again at a clearing where the first weak rays of sun caught the frost, transforming the forest into a cathedral of crystalline light. Kneeling, he spread the scrolls before him, feeling the morning wind teasing the edges as if eager to participate in this sacred communion. He traced the curves of each letter with fingertips, inhaling the faint aroma of ink and aged parchment, and for a fleeting moment, centuries collapsed. Kings, peasants, scribes, and saints whispered simultaneously, a chorus of lives intersecting in the quiet of his devotion. He read of battles fought across frozen plains, of alliances sealed with blood and promises, of lovers meeting in secret under moonlit arches, of children clutching hope like fragile lanterns in the dark. Each story carried the tremor of human ambition, fear, and longing. The snow around him seemed to listen, settling more heavily with each revelation, its whiteness absorbing grief and triumph alike. The weight of absence pressed upon him, yet it was not sorrow that filled him, it was purpose. To carry these stories, to let them breathe again in a world that had almost forgotten them, was an act of rebellion against time. His heart beat in rhythm with the ink-stained pages, each pulse a reminder that memory could endure, that voices could persist even when their bodies had returned to dust. Every step forward was a journey through memory, a pilgrimage across frozen time. The frozen brook whispered beneath its ice, the shadowed oaks loomed, and the drifting snow wove through the forest like threads of a forgotten tapestry. They were no longer merely landscape. They were participants in the dialogue between past and present. He rolled the manuscripts carefully, nestling them once more in the satchel, each scroll a heartbeat tucked against his side. A distant caw echoed through the trees, sharp and insistent, and he imagined it as a call from those who had walked before him, guiding him onward. Shadows lengthened as the sun rose higher, yet the forest remained cloaked in a kind of timeless dusk. Every tree, every branch, every frozen ripple of the brook seemed infused with history. He moved slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of generations press upon him, not a burden to crush him, but a sacred trust to uphold. His breath formed clouds in the icy air, carrying whispered fragments of prayers and commands, laughter and cries, all of which had been swallowed by centuries, now restored by the mere act of bearing witness. The path narrowed, winding through the oaks like a river of frost, and he realized that each step forward was an act of communion. He felt the presence of the scribe who had penned these scrolls, the child who had left a footprint in mud centuries ago, the king who had prayed for mercy he would never receive. Their voices rose together, faint but unmistakable, urging him to continue. He was their vessel, their keeper, the fragile bridge between silence and remembrance. And then, as the light shifted and shadows fell long and thin across the snow, he came upon a hollow where the ground was disturbed, as though something or someone had passed through recently. His heart quickened, not with fear, but with the solemn understanding that history was never truly dead. Each trace of presence, each mark upon the earth, was a continuation of the story, a testament that life, in all its fragility, persisted against the relentless erosion of time. With a final glance at the crystalline clearing, he rose. The forest, vast and indifferent, seemed to acknowledge his presence, a silent witness to his devotion. His path stretched onward, both through snow and memory, each step a fragile bridge connecting the living to those long vanished. The wind rose again, carrying the faint, sonorous echoes of languages long forgotten, words that had commanded armies, swayed courts, and soothed the dying. They brushed against his ears like fleeting ghosts, urging him to move forward, to continue the sacred task entrusted to him. The monk's breath came in visible puffs, his boots leaving prints that would vanish beneath the shifting snow. Yet each mark mattered. Each manuscript, each story, each whisper of life he carried was a defiance of time, a proof that the past was never truly gone. Somewhere ahead lay the continuation of these lives, another place where the voices of kings, scribes, and children might rise once more, if only he could bear them forward. He walked on, a solitary guardian of fragile histories, carrying the weight of centuries across the frost-laden forest. Snow swirled at his feet, reflecting fragments of stories he would never fully know, yet understood with profound clarity. The forest held its secrets close, yet it had entrusted them to him. He felt their trust as tangibly as the leather of his satchel against his chest. Each breath drew him deeper into the path, deeper into the sacred rhythm of memory and survival. And as the pale sun climbed, scattering the last shadows of night, he knew that he was not alone. He walked with the countless souls who had entrusted their voices to parchment, with the histories that demanded remembrance, with the echoes of a time that refused to vanish entirely. Beneath the towering arches of the ruined cathedral, sunlight pierced the fractured stained glass with an almost sacred insistence, scattering shards of crimson, violet, and gold across the cold, cracked stone floor. Dust hung in the air like a trembling veil, disturbed by the historian's careful steps, each one stirring centuries of silence and emotion. The stone beneath his feet was uneven, worn by countless footsteps long since vanished, yet resonating still with echoes of lives that once breathed within these walls. His fingers traced the grooves of the carved letters on a pulpit toppled by time, worn smooth by generations of worshippers whose prayers had once pressed into the wood as urgently as their hearts pressed against the earth. A faint scent of incense lingered, ghostly and persistent, intertwining with the dampness of storms long past, the faint, acrid trace of burnt offerings, and the earthy tang of moss creeping along the edges of collapsed columns. Each inhalation was a communion with the past, and he could feel it, a pulse, fragile yet persistent, like the heartbeat of a world already vanished. The letters under his fingertips were more than symbols. They were vestiges of devotion, doubt, and rebellion. Each groove told a story of trembling faith and fierce desire, of hands that sought comfort in ritual and hearts that quaked in uncertainty. He leaned closer, feeling the texture of the stone against his skin, imagining the lives that pressed against it. Monks in threadbare robes, their knees bruised from kneeling, eyes strained from reading holy texts by flickering torchlight, pilgrims stumbling over thresholds, their faces damp with rain, their mouths silent with whispered prayers, children chased through aisles by nuns' warnings, their laughter echoing like bells too faint to ring. All of them had left a trace, etched into stone and air, and now, centuries later, those traces were his only guide through a world he could no longer enter but could almost touch. The wind rattled the fractured doors, carrying the cries of distant gulls from the sea cliffs beyond and the soft hammer of rain against roofless walls. It seemed to speak, urgent and alive, as though the cathedral itself were trying to communicate across time. In response, he felt a tremor inside himself, an uncanny connection that made it seem as though the stones themselves breathed, exhaling centuries of prayer and despair. He closed his eyes and let the silence envelop him, hearing faintly the voices that had once filled this place. Choristers weaving sacred harmonies, priests intoning in solemn cadence, supplicants murmuring their sins into the cavernous air, each voice layered upon another, creating a symphony of longing that lingered even in absence. His gaze wandered across the shattered mosaics littering the floor. Fragments of colored glass, once meticulously arranged into images of saints, angels, and divine symbols, now lay scattered like stars fallen from a forgotten sky. Once, these floors had guided the faithful, their intricate designs reflecting light from candles and torches, creating a landscape of luminous devotion. Now, in their ruin, they spoke of transience, the fragility of human ambition, and the persistence of memory through stone and dust. He could almost hear the footsteps that had worn channels into these mosaics, the shuffle of sandals and leather boots, the soft pad of bare feet in penitence, the echo of a congregation moving as one under the watchful gaze of painted angels. Above him, the arches stretched skyward, fractured and jagged, veins of sunlight bleeding through their cracks, illuminating centuries of craftsmanship and care. The masons who had carved these arches labored under immense pressure, both literal and spiritual, their hands blistered, their backs bent, their eyes narrowing against sunlight and dust. They had believed that their labor could capture the divine, that stone could hold spirit, that eternity might be inscribed in the grooves of their chisels. And in this, the historian understood a truth about mortality. Though flesh and blood fade, intention can endure, echoing across centuries in the language of creation. He crouched among the debris again, fingertips lingering on an inscription partially eroded by wind and rain. The name carved there was barely legible, yet it carried with it the weight of a life once vivid and urgent. He imagined the person behind the letters, a devout soul, perhaps trembling with fear of punishment or burning with hope for salvation. Perhaps they had knelt here every day, morning and evening, seeking absolution, comfort, or simply the presence of something larger than themselves. Perhaps they were forgotten entirely, swept away by the relentless tide of history. And yet, in stone, their existence endured, a whisper against the void, a proof that even the smallest life leaves a trace. The cathedral was alive with memory, its voice subtle but persistent. He felt it in the rhythm of the rain, the groan of shifting stone, the rustle of wind through hollow spaces. Shadows played across the walls, animated by sun and cloud, revealing glimpses of figures long gone. A mother clasping her child, a scholar hunched over an illuminated manuscript, a soldier kneeling in trembling contrition. He could almost hear their thoughts, the prayers unspoken, the doubts concealed, the bargains struck with God and man alike. Every gesture, every whisper, every fleeting act of devotion had been captured by the cathedral, preserved in the delicate interplay of stone and light. He rose slowly, brushing dust from his coat, and allowed his gaze to drift toward the altar, now a ruin of splintered marble and shattered wood. Here, life and death had once intersected in the sacred rhythm of ritual, the ringing of bells that called the faithful, the murmur of hymns rising to vaulted ceilings, the soft cadence of incense curling upward like smoke from a hearth. He imagined this ceremony, every detail. The flicker of candlelight over gold leaf, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the resinous smoke of burnt offerings, the hushed breath of a congregation suspended between earth and heaven. All of it was gone, yet in his mind's eye, it was vivid, a tapestry of devotion frozen in memory. Time, he realized, was both absent and present. The silence of centuries pressed down on him, yet within it, there was vitality, the echo of footsteps, the ghost of prayers, the shadow of hands tracing letters into stone. He reached out to a wall where faint frescoes remained, the pigment flaking and faded, but still hinting at stories of martyrdom, temptation, and divine mercy. Each figure seemed to gaze at him with quiet accusation or benediction, their eyes a mirror reflecting human frailty and endurance alike. In their silent judgment, he felt an intimate connection, the weight of countless lives converging in a single, trembling moment of comprehension. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of brine and decay, of earth and rain, of the distant forest where roots tore at stone foundations. The historian closed his eyes again and listened, the rain dripping from fractured beams, the distant gulls calling over the cliffs, the faint creak of timbers settling under centuries of weight. He imagined the cathedral alive with motion and sound, and in that imagining, he understood history not as something written and recorded, but as something lived and felt, tangible in the echo of stone, the tremor of air, the scent of time itself. He knelt once more among the debris, fingertips brushing a final line of carved letters, a prayer whose meaning was lost, but whose emotional resonance remained, a plea, a lament, a hope suspended across centuries. He thought of those who had sought refuge here in times of plague, famine, and war, their lives unfolding in shadowed corners while the world beyond trembled with uncertainty. Perhaps they had clutched one another in fear, or lifted their eyes skyward in desperate appeal. Perhaps they had argued, betrayed one another, fallen in love, or whispered secrets no other soul would ever hear. All of it, immortalized in stone, persisted in quiet defiance of mortality. The cathedral exhaled one final time as sunlight shifted, painting the fractured floors with gold and crimson light. Dust motes danced in the beams, tiny sparks of memory lifted into the air. He rose, the pulse of the cathedral now echoing within him, a rhythm older than any human voice, a song of devotion, fear, longing, and endurance. Beyond the walls, the rain ceased to drum, leaving a fragile silence, punctuated only by distant gulls and the whisper of wind. In that silence, he sensed the stories yet untold, the secrets still murmuring in shadowed corners, the lives waiting to be discovered, the prayers waiting to be felt anew. As he stepped toward the fractured doors, sunlight illuminating the path before him, he carried the cathedral with him, not in body, but in spirit. Each echo, each shadow, each carved letter had become a part of him, a reminder that history is not merely observed, it is inhabited. He would leave this place physically, yet the cathedral's memory, with all its devotion, sorrow, and fragile hope, would remain, a quiet companion as he ventured back into a world that had long forgotten the weight of stone and the endurance of the human heart. And in the fading light, the cathedral waited, waiting for the next voice to awaken it, the next hand to trace its stories, the next soul willing to inhabit the silence, to breathe life back into stone and dust, to remember what once was and what might yet be. The scriptorium clings to the cliffs as if it were a living thing, its stones grasping at the air, defying gravity, defying time. Outside, the world is swallowed by a dense, silver-gray mist, curling like ghostly fingers around jagged rocks. muffling the roar of the river far below. It carries whispers of lands unseen, carrying scents of damp earth and pine, a cold breath from the mountains above. Within, the air is thick with smoke curling from the solitary candle, the pungent, metallic tang of ink, and the faint musk of centuries-old stone. Shelves sag under the weight of manuscripts, their leather cracked, their parchment yellowed and brittle, each spine a silent sentinel of voices long gone. A young scribe bends over her desk, quill poised like a fragile weapon in her hand. Her lips move silently, forming words that have not been spoken aloud for centuries. Each line she traces is a heartbeat stolen from the past, a song that once rang out in courts, marketplaces, and temples, now trapped only in the silence of ink. She copies faded symbols into her own bound codex, each mark a fragile thread in a tapestry stretching across time. Her eyes, strained from exhaustion, flicker across the pages, deciphering fragments of cosmologies, of laws, of lives and loves thought long extinguished. The candlelight dances across her workspace, throwing shadows that twist and bend against the walls, a silent audience to her devotion. Moonlight seeps through a narrow window, scattering across the floor and striking the dust in the air, turning it into a constellation of fleeting stars. The river below hums in gentle insistence, a hidden undercurrent beneath her fragile world, carrying secrets far downstream, secrets she hopes to match, to preserve in the permanence of ink and parchment. Each drip of water from the stone ceiling above echoes like a distant drum, a subtle metronome marking the relentless passage of time. She feels it, a sacred tension hanging in the air, vibrating between the living and the dead. Each letter she traces is a bridge to voices that have long ceased to exist. She traces a curve, dips the quill into ink, and allows herself a fleeting vision of the hands that first wrote these symbols. She imagines the people who once uttered these words, the hearts that trembled with longing, the minds that reached for something beyond themselves. The letters are prayers, confessions, proclamations of faith and love, whispering into a void that she alone dares to fill. Her fingers ache, blackened by ink, trembling from the cold that seeps through the stone walls. Yet she continues, drawn by a force older than duty, a rhythm that pulses through the night, through mist and river, through memory itself. Every symbol she copies is a testament to resilience, a whisper to the future, a defiance against the silence of oblivion. She pauses for a moment, closing her eyes, and listens to the wind crawling along the cliffs, carrying the faintest echoes of the past. Somewhere in that wind, she hears the murmurs of monks chanting in distant abbeys, the laughter of children who will never again exist, the sighs of lovers separated by time and fate. She opens her eyes and resumes, quill scratching in soft insistence, each movement deliberate, a ritual. Her breath forms tiny clouds in the chill air, curling above the candle like ephemeral spirits. Outside, the mist thickens, shrouding the river and cliffs, hiding the world in silence. Yet inside, the manuscripts hum with life, the letters she copies vibrating faintly under her hand, each stroke a heartbeat, a voice restored. She whispers to herself, though not entirely in her own tongue, as if the ink itself expects a companion in her devotion. Hours fold into one another, the candle burning low, smoke spiraling in delicate arabesques, a fleeting mirror of constellations long vanished. Her body trembles with fatigue, yet her mind is unyielding, tethered to the manuscripts as if they were lifelines. Every page is a fragile vessel, every word a beacon in the darkness, preserving what the world has tried to forget. She copies a line of law, a fragment of cosmology, then a song of love, each mark carrying weight beyond her own understanding. In these moments, She is both prisoner and liberator, trapped in the silent room, yet freeing voices that might otherwise have been lost to the river of time. A sudden creak beneath her desk startles her, heart leaping. The shadows flicker, bending like living creatures in the candlelight. She tells herself it is nothing, that the scriptorium has known many nights of silence. Yet the pull in her chest is unmistakable. The manuscripts seem to pulse, alive in the dim glow, as though aware of the care lavished upon them. She dips her quill again, careful to let the ink flow like a river, ready to carry fragments into the codex, to preserve what memory alone cannot hold. Outside, the mist is a living thing, curling into the narrow window, seeping into the room like breath. She imagines it as the past itself, sliding in to observe her work, watching a solitary hand preserve a civilization's whispers. Every symbol she traces vibrates with the weight of what once was: lost cities, vanished temples, forgotten rites. She feels the presence of the long dead, not as ghosts but as currents of thought and life, flowing invisibly around her. Her quill moves faster now, compelled, an urgent rhythm fueled by awe and fear, devotion and desperation. She stops briefly, listening. The river below murmurs endlessly, carrying remnants of distant storms, harvests, battles, and ceremonies, all flowing past unremarked. She imagines them as a chorus, each sound a faint echo of lives long extinguished, yet alive in her hands. The manuscripts before her are not inert. They are vessels of memory, delicate and vulnerable, waiting for the touch that will grant them continuation. She is their guardian, their voice, their bridge. The candle sputters, smoke curling upward in thin spirals, and she leans forward, drawing warmth from her labor. Her body aches, ink-stained fingers cramping, but the sacred tension sustains her. The night deepens, pressing upon the scriptorium in heavy velvet folds. Yet the young scribe persists, translating fragments, shaping symbols, breathing life into words that no one else will ever hear. She murmurs under her breath, not fully understanding the meaning, yet feeling the resonance, the echo of human thought that stretches beyond her. In the quiet, she imagines the lives entwined with each letter. The merchants who traded by the riverbanks, the priests who chanted beneath stone arches, the lovers who whispered promises in shadowed halls. She imagines the streets, the laughter, the grief, all flowing into these symbols, distilled into ink on parchment. She traces each curve as if stroking the very memory of the world, bringing it from oblivion into the fragile permanence of her book. Time stretches like a suspended thread. Dawn has yet to touch the sky, yet a faint silver glow seeps through the mist. She leans back, shoulders tight, eyes stinging, and surveys her work. The room is alive with shadows and dust, the river murmuring below, the wind curling through cracks in the stone, carrying faint hints of past and future. She closes her codex gently, a protective gesture, as one might cradle a child. In this act, she honors not only the words she has preserved, but the countless voices she has carried into continuity. The first hints of daylight spill across the walls, softening the edges of the scriptorium, the manuscripts, the young scribe herself. She breathes deeply, sensing the invisible threads she has woven between centuries, the fragile lifelines connecting her present to countless pasts. Somewhere far below, the river continues its endless journey, indifferent to human memory. Yet she has made a sanctuary, a place where voices refuse to vanish entirely. Every letter traced, every symbol preserved, is an act of defiance against time itself. She allows herself a moment of quiet reverence, letting the sacred tension ease, feeling a fragile hope bloom in the stillness. The voices she guards may yet echo beyond the reach of centuries. She lifts her gaze to the horizon, watching mist give way to pale light, knowing tomorrow will demand her vigilance once more. Yet for now, she is part of something vast and unbroken. She has become both witness and keeper, a solitary conduit for civilization's whispers. In the hush of dawn, she feels the river of memory pulse beneath her fingertips, eternal and unyielding, and for a fleeting moment, she is certain that the dead will speak again. The sun hangs low, a pale smear of gold over the river's edge, where mud swallows the footsteps of those who dare to walk the forgotten banks. Here, the final remnants of a city long drowned cling stubbornly beneath layers of silt and sorrow, as if the earth itself wishes to keep its secrets. The wind moves in whispers, threading through the reeds and stirring the faint perfume of waterlogged stone, carrying the quiet ache of centuries that no living soul has heard. Time seems to bend here, folding over itself like the waves against the submerged walls, pressing the present against the weight of memory. Archaeologists bend low, their hands trembling as they brush away centuries of concealment, revealing shards of tablets etched with scripts that refuse to speak in tongues known to the present. Each fragment, damp with the scent of river mud and the faint tang of long-dead fire, seems to pulse with the memory of the hands that first pressed symbols into wet clay. Fingers trace the jagged edges, and for a fleeting instant, one can imagine the city breathing again. The markets teeming with voices, the merchants calling out prices for grain, oil, and woven cloth, their words sliding across the cobblestones like water over stone. The tablets speak in fragments. A priest murmuring incantations at dawn, a child laughing as she races along narrow alleys, bare feet slapping against the worn stones, a lover's sigh pressed into the clay, a promise that now lies scattered and silent. Every break, every crack in the tablets is a heartbeat interrupted, every faded glyph a sigh suspended in stone, waiting for the patient eye that can hear it. The city is alive again, though only in fragments, its pulse felt in the tremor of the earth beneath hands, in the fleeting warmth of sunlight catching dust motes that dance like embers in the fog. Above them, a bird cries, wings slicing the gray sky, a sharp, sudden punctuation to the stillness. The sound seems almost sacrilegious in its intrusion, yet it is the only voice in the vast quiet that blankets the river, the reeds, the slow-motion decay of walls that once rang with laughter and argument. The team pauses chest tight, senses sharpened. The silence is vast, almost sacred, and in its emptiness, they feel the presence of lives that once were, lives that moved and loved and feared beneath the same sun, but which now exist only in the residue of mud, in whispers pressed into stone. As the tablets are uncovered, their surfaces glint faintly in the shifting light. Every curve of the cuneiform-like etchings seems deliberate, a mark left with intention, each line a thread in a story that refuses to vanish entirely. One scholar leans closer, eyes squinting at a particular glyph, and feels it vibrate beneath her gaze. It is not language as we know it. It is rhythm, the cadence of daily life, the hammering of a smith, the splash of water from the river basin, the hush of the market when a nobleman passes. Here is the hum of civilization, faint but persistent, buried beneath the mud and the years, yet impossible to silence. The river carries its own memory, speaking in murmurs that rise to merge with the whispers of stone. Water laps against shattered walls, as if eager to keep the city's stories afloat. Reeds bend and sway, bowing to an audience that no longer exists, rustling against the wind in a language of their own. And in that fragile conversation between earth and water, stone and silence, the past presses forward, insisting that it be acknowledged. The city does not reveal itself fully. Its heart remains submerged, guarded by mud and time, but it offers glimpses, flickers of life for those who are patient enough to witness them. The archaeologists move carefully, mindful of the fragile narratives that lie in pieces. They whisper to one another, not in the words of the past, but in the quiet reverence that the past demands. A child's laughter from 1,000 years ago seems to echo in the mist, or is it only the memory conjured from the rhythm of the river? A merchant's cry drifts faintly, carried on the current, or perhaps it is the wind shaping itself around human longing. The distinction matters little. What matters is the pulse of life that once ran through these streets, still detectable in the very decay that surrounds them. The sun shifts, sending long fingers of light across the river, illuminating fragments of walls, a solitary column, the arch of a doorway submerged in silt. Each shard of clay, each fragment of brick, becomes a lens through which the city speaks. The texture of the mud clings to fingers like memory itself, sticky and impossible to shake off. The scent of wet earth mingles with the faint smoke of ancient hearths, a ghostly perfume that conjures kitchens where bread once baked, fires where wood crackled, and smoke rose in soft spirals to stain the sky with warmth and labor. Every artifact carries more than its surface markings. A shard of pottery, etched with the line of a hand, tells of a potter shaping clay in the dim glow of dawn. A fragment of a tablet bears the impression of fingertips pressed too hard or too hurriedly into the soft stone, whispering impatience, devotion, or perhaps despair. Here is not history as an abstract record, but history as lived experience, tactile and immediate, a bridge across the centuries. The air trembles with the weight of absence. Silence has its own texture. The hush of the riverbank, the muffled sighs of stone pressed under silt, the small creaks of reeds bending with the wind. The archaeologists breathe it in, letting the emptiness settle into their bones, feeling the city's absence as a presence. It is the quiet that teaches them more than the fragments ever could. The stillness between lives, the pause between words, the moments of fear, hope, and devotion that pulse through the void. A sudden splash breaks the reverie, a fish leaping from the dark water, and the spell shifts. The sound is startling, alive, yet it does not dispel the memory suspended in the mud. Rather, it anchors the city in its environment, the rhythm of life persisting even beneath the weight of loss. Reeds bend and sway again, murmuring, and the river carries its own language, one that interlaces with the fragments of clay, the shadows of walls, the echoes of footsteps that will never return. Night approaches slowly, but not before the scholars catch one last glimpse of sunlight kissing the river. In that golden moment, the city seems almost present, its streets alive, its voices rising faintly through the mist, the hum of labor, the laughter of children, the solemn chants of priests in hidden temples. One can almost see them, figures etched in dust and water, walking the lines of their own lives, unaware of the centuries yet to come that will bury their existence under mud and silt. Each fragment, each tablet, each shard becomes a testament to endurance. Even as the river swallows walls and the wind scatters the ashes of fire, memory survives. Every curve of a glyph, every indentation pressed into clay, every fragment of pottery or brick is proof that life existed here. Life that loved, feared, traded, prayed, and hoped. Life that, though buried, refuses to be forgotten. The scholars pack their tools, carefully laying each fragment into crates cushioned against the weight of time. Their movements are slow, deliberate, mindful of the fragile threads that connect past to present. And as they step back from the mud-laden banks, the last rays of sunlight glint upon waterlogged clay, igniting the fragments in a fleeting blaze of amber and gold. Shadows stretch long across the silt, swallowing the work of the day, yet the river murmurs on, carrying the city's story downstream, indifferent yet eternal. They pause once more, one last glance over the shoulder, feeling the city's quiet insistence. It is not gone. Its voice is subtle, interwoven into the wind, the reeds, the river's embrace, waiting for those willing to hear. Even in ruin, memory persists. Even in silence, the city speaks. The fragments are not simply artifacts. They're the heartbeat of a people long vanished, still audible to those who listen. The mist thickens, rolling across the river like a slow tide of ghosts. Shapes of walls and columns rise through the haze, half seen, half remembered. The city is a shadow pressing against the present, its pulse faint but real, urging the living to remember, to honor, to feel. And in that waiting, a promise lingers. Though time erases, memory endures, threaded through clay, water, wind, and reed. The past is patient. It waits quietly for hands willing to touch, eyes willing to see, hearts willing to feel. And so they leave the riverbank, footsteps swallowed by the mud, carrying with them not just artifacts, but the fragile, enduring pulse of life itself. The sun dips lower, and the river shimmers with reflection, as if acknowledging the witness. The city, sunken though it may be, is alive in memory, speaking to all who would dare to listen. In every ripple of water, every rustle of reeds, every faint whisper of wind, it persists, a story of loss, resilience, and the eternal insistence of human life, waiting to be heard again.